It's Friday, February 6th, 2026. We've got a Friday 5-pack and not Ask or Tell Me Anything, our poll of the week. It's coming up next on the AM Update. Well, I needed a day off to rest the vocal cords. Haven't really felt that sick. Don't really feel that awful. Just had a nasty voice there for a few days as the sickness has been making its way through my and pretty much everybody else's family over the last few weeks, it sounds like. Let's get to a Friday 5-pack before we go into our very much responded to poll of the week in the second segment. First, we're going to start with this. It's time to start sounding the Danger Will Robinson or Danger Economy alarm bells. U.S. employers announced job cuts surged in January and hit the highest level since 2009. Global outplacement and executive coaching firm Challenger Gray and Christmas found that employers announced 108,435 job cuts in January, an increase from the 49,795 cuts announced in the same month last year. Job cuts increased 205% from December when they were 35,553 layoffs. This January saw the most layoffs for the month of January since 2009, when 241,000 cuts were announced, also the highest monthly total since October 2025, when there were 153,000 layoffs. Not a great sign. There are a number of different employment analytics firms out there. I believe it was a few weeks ago, we had some good data in terms of young people, I think it was, getting into the labor market, also mixed with some bad data. I mean, I think that the data was the highest median age for first-time job holder, something along those lines. There are just too many smoke signals. There's just too much smoke when it comes to this fire. And I'm not cheering for this at all. But the economy is not doing well. I've been trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt as much as possible, but there are just too many signals here. And again, this is not government data. This is an independent analysis, so you got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But in terms of whether or not people are feeling the economic turnaround we think is hoping is coming, that's definitely not the case yet. Again, when the tax returns come in, hopefully people will start to feel the effects of the one big beautiful bill and the tax benefits therein. Back at the White House on the issue of deportations, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked if it's still the policy of the administration to deport everyone. Everybody's got to go back. Here's what she had to say.
Came here under Joe Biden, or are you starting to see that back?
Yes, and the president has always been committed to that, John. But we must prioritize, and the prioritization is on those tens of thousands of convicted criminals whom we know are still roaming our streets. ICE and Border Patrol and DHS have done a phenomenal job of removing tens of thousands of them. Actually, nearly 1 million people have been deported from our country over the past year, 2 million additional self-deportations. So nearly 3 million people have left the United States.
So there's Caroline Leavitt at the White House saying, yes, it's still the mass deportation plan that everybody's got to go. The reason she was asked is because of Trump's comments to NBC News earlier this week.
Speaking of Minneapolis, what did you learn?
I learned that maybe we can use a little bit of a softer touch, but you still have to be tough. These are criminals. We're dealing with really hard criminals. But look, I've called the people. I've called the governor. I've called the mayor, spoke to them, had great conversations with them, and then I see them ranting and raving out there, literally as though a call wasn't made.
President Trump telling NBC News, softer touch in Minneapolis. I think what's going on here is the same thing that President Trump did during the campaign on the issue of baby killing, where he'd message one way to one media outlet, one targeted group of people, and message a completely different way to a more friendly group of people. Call it dishonest, call it prudent, call it whatever you want. I think that's what's going on here on the issue of deportations, because he is certainly, if you go on his Truth Social feed, it's a much different message than what you just heard him give to NBC News. Chuck Schumer thinks that 71% of his own party are racist supporters of Jim Crow laws.
So, Leader Schumer, this talk about election security has revived discussions of the SAVE Act, which you have said you oppose. Proponents of it say that it's, to have ID, you have to prove U.S. citizenship to be able to vote, though some of the claims they make, to be clear, are overstated. We know there's not widespread election fraud. But polling does suggest, there's a new Pew Research poll, that 95% of Republicans, but also 71% of Democrats like this idea. So why do you not?
It's Jim Crow 2.0, and I called it Jim Crow 2.0, and the right wing went nuts all over the internet. That's because they know it's true. What they're trying to do here is the same thing that was done in the South for decades to prevent people of color from voting. For instance, if you change, you're a woman who got married and changed your last name, you won't be able to show ID and you'll be discriminated against.
Yeah, sure. Whatever, Chuck. Chuck Schumer on the artist formerly known as MSNBC. It's now called MS Now or whatever. Saying that he was just confronted with the polling. 71% of his own party, 71% of Democrats think that making sure you're a citizen of this country should be required to vote. And he says, you're all a bunch of Jim Crow supporters. That's pretty awesome. Story number 4 on our Friday 5-pack. This is a story, but the real story is even more fascinating. It's from CBS News. Newly released Department of Justice documents show that investigators reviewing surveillance footage from the night of Jeffrey Epstein's death observed an orange-colored shape moving up a staircase towards the isolated locked tier where his cell was located at approximately 10:39 p.m. on August 19th, 2019. That entry into an observation log of the video from Metropolitan Correctional Center appears to suggest something previously unreported by authorities. A flash of orange looks to be going up the L-tier stairs, could possibly be an inmate escorted up to that tier. It also appears, according to FBI memorandums, that the reviews by investigators led to disparate conclusions by the FBI and those examining the same video from the Department of Justice's official inspector general. The FBI log describes the funny image as possibly an inmate. So isn't that interesting? I mean, that story is interesting in and of itself in its own right. Finding some new documents, finding a new aberration maybe in the footage, that's a good story in and of itself. But the real story is this. CBS News has a strange new respect for just asking questions about, did Jeffrey Epstein actually kill himself, after dismissing such things for years and years and years as the stuff of conspiracy theories. That's the real story here. And, let's just say I'm skeptical about their motivations. But if they're trying to bury FBI leadership, if they're trying to embarrass the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, they kind of deserve it. Final story in our Friday 5-pack. Been sitting on this all week. Never had a chance to get to it. PepsiCo, maker of the popular brands like Doritos, Lay's, and Cheetos, slashing the price of its snacks by up to 15%. In response to consumer complaints, they've become too expensive. In a release Tuesday, PepsiCo Foods CEO Rachel Ferdinando says that she's spent the last year listening closely to consumers, and they've told us they're feeling the strain and that lowering the suggested retail price reflects our commitment to help reduce the pressure where we can. Shoppers in the United States will begin seeing the new prices this week ahead of the Super Bowl on Sunday, which is traditionally one of the biggest days for buying snacks. New labeling on the products will advertise the reduced prices. So they're saying they're listening to consumers. Maybe that's part of it. I think what's really going on here, we had a slew of states, not every state, but a large heaping handful of states saying, no, you can't use welfare benefits to buy junk food anymore. And so we pulled the government out of the business of buying junk food. And guess what? The price of junk food now being slashed by 15%. I don't know, maybe it's just coincidence. When we come back, we will discuss in depth our poll of the week. It's coming up next. Back for one final segment this week on the AM Update. It's our poll of the week. I asked you, very black-pilled poll. I'm sorry. Try not to be too cynical. Do you understand why I asked these questions? I asked you, how do you think Senate Republicans will try to screw us on the SAVE Act? I gave you 4 options. I thought that I was actually running a poll here. It gave me the poll field, and then when I posted the actual question and saw this a couple hours later, it actually didn't have any percentage points. So we're just going to go through all of your comments one by one. But here are the options that I gave you. A, pass the IVESTK, which is SAVE Act spelled backwards, both words. Pass the IVESTK with bipartisan support, which they'll claim requires voter ID, but actually grants amnesty, mass amnesty, to millions. That's option A. B, pretend they've all fallen mute in death. How do you think Senate Republicans try to screw us on the SAVE Act? That's B, falling mute in death. Option C, screw you, Aaron, because option D, they're feeling enough pressure, they'll have to pass it somehow. That's the optimistic choice. I'm just going to go through these rapid fire as fast as I can, maybe providing a few bits of comments here and there. Right Wing Dad says, option A, it's a midterm year and they're going to milk the vote for us or else crap all year. If they don't pass it, we're screwed as a nation. Yep. You know what? We could just end it there if we wanted to. Paul Jones says, first I've heard of the IVESTK, so I voted for that one, A. The Christian Philosopher says, without a doubt, B, especially if Mitch McConnell has anything to say about it, falling mute and deaf. Bob Krall says D with a mountain of unsmoked pork. So Bob is optimistic they'll get this passed. Tom Bazika says, I chose B, deaf and mute, because nothing else from which to choose that made any sense for me. I think some of the GOP still thinks they need to support corporate America by not voting for the SAVE Act. They're out of touch with reality since Democrats are now the corporatists. Hey, that's a good observation. Doesn't it behoove you politically both ways, both from the lobbyist perspective and from the voter perspective, to curtail illegals from voting? The dirty little secret, though, that I think a lot of people would come back with, Tom, to respond to your last point, Democrats are corporatists now, and that's true, is that the corporatists, the corporate lobbyists are still spending a lot of money on the Republicans, too. Jim says, most likely A, selling us out on something that will grant mass amnesty because GOP is going to GOP, or they may bring it to the floor long enough for both parties to get some clickbait material, then pull it because we need larger majorities, fundraise, lose midterms, rinse, repeat. Melissa Bohannon says it's both A and B. They'll do A, sell us out, do mass amnesty instead, and then transition to B when questioned about screwing us over and the screw job that they gave us. Redacted says A and or B is clearly the answer. I wish it wasn't the case, but I also wish I hit the lotto. Neither has happened. Philip Bishop says all of the above. Andy says there are far more likely to do B or C, deaf and mute, or C, screw you, Aaron, then probably D, which is the optimistic option. As A seems unlikely given the current climate. So Andy's actually pretty optimistic. Some Call Me Tim says A and B. James Moon responds with a GIF, first time here on the gallows. You know that one. When discourse ends, violence begins, says A and B. Jay Breezy says A, never underestimate the GOP screwing its base. Craig Willoughby says E, F the base and everything else that they stand for. Jay Kiefer says B, falling blind, deaf, mute, whatever. Tano the Texan says Donald Trump could easily push for this if he cared about the SAVE Act, but where is he? Silent and only embracing the Senate Republicans. So much for that. He does need to get on their case. I agree, especially soon. He's going to have to do it soon. Follow Truth says definitely A and B. They're going to screw us over. They'll act dumb and or say it's not true. AG says A and B. They don't care about D. Swen Johnson says D. Between the president using his political capital and public sentiment being so strong, I believe they will be forced to pass it. Country Squire says D. Chuck Freezy says B. Dalton Bell says E. The Republicans are cowards who think that being nice will finally win over the demons who actually will use their power. Trumpet Tiger says both A and B. They'll pass the IVESTK. Yes, I see what you did there. Claim it requires voter ID, but grant mass amnesty instead. And then they'll pretend they've all fallen mute and deaf when everyone tries to call them out on it. This condition will mysteriously improve shortly after Labor Day when they'll all be screaming at us to vote for them to evas Akarima, which I think is America. Mike Drogo says A is most likely, but the Republicans have not yet begun to figure out ways to screw their base. It could truly be anything. I just know we will all be very disappointed, yet not surprised. Zealous for Truth says A, the Senate Republican Party counters the House SAVE Act with a watery poo version. They claim and sell the media to Bard for them. The House Republican Party won't even bother. The Senate claims moving on. John, M into USA. E is his option. Look, Epstein files. Anna says A. A to B says A and B and C. I like that A to B. And D. W. Sullivan says B. Well, there goes my voice. The frog is back. I hope you have a much sunnier, brighter, happy weekend than what we just discussed. Because when we start to plumb the depths of how, why, when, where, and to what degree, especially Senate Republicans, but Republicans in Congress in general, will screw us, it gets really dark really fast. That's going to do it for this week. Back at it again on Monday.